He had a falsetto that touched the sky, but the ground was waiting to catch him. Fame is a cruel teacher. It gives you the world and then demands a terrible price. Just look at Otis Redding or Reba McEntire. They lost everything in the blink of an eye. But for this man, the tragedy was slow and painful. His band was called Heatwave. They were the pride of Ohio and the kings of funk, but their fire burned too bright. You know the song Always and Forever? Now, meet the man who paid the cost to sing it. Dayton, Ohio is holy ground. They call it the land of funk for a reason. But before the bright lights and the gold records, there was just a boy named Johnnie Wilder Jr. He was born on the 3rd of July, 1949. He was the oldest of 5 kids. Being the oldest means you have to lead. You have to be strong. His daddy, Johnnie Sr., ran a club. The house was always filled with the smooth sounds of jazz. You could hear the trumpets and the bass lines shaking the floorboards. Johnnie soaked it all up like a sponge. He learned that music wasn't just noise. It was a feeling, but life wasn't easy. Money was tight. His mother, Lucille, was a warrior. She wanted her boys to have the best education. She sent them to an all-boys Catholic school, but tuition cost money they did not have. So Lucille put on her work clothes. She worked at that very same school just to pay their way. She scrubbed and cleaned so her sons could learn. That is love. That is sacrifice. But here is the deal. Johnnie wasn't just a singer. He was a machine. In high school, he and his brother Keith were famous. They danced and sang and won every award in sight. But Johnnie had a secret weapon. He went to Central State University in 1969. He studied math. He was smart, but he also minored in gymnastics. Picture this: a young man flipping through the air, muscles tense, perfect balance. He dreamed of the U.S. Olympics. He wanted to bring home the gold for his country. His body was his temple. It was strong. It was unbreakable, or so he thought. That physical strength was his ticket to the top. But gravity pulls hardest on those who fly the highest. He graduated college and got married, ready to take on the world. He thought his legs would carry him forever. He had no idea that his greatest asset would one day betray him. The music was calling, but fate was already setting a trap. Johnnie Wilder Jr. did not stay in Ohio forever. Uncle Sam called his name. He joined the U.S. Army and they sent him across the ocean to West Germany. Most men just count the days until they can go home. But Johnnie found a new rhythm in the cold European air. He started singing in clubs. He found other soldiers and musicians who were hungry. They were starving for success. He discharged from the army, but he did not come back to Dayton yet. He went to London. This is where the magic started to brew. He placed an ad in a local paper. He was looking for players. He found a man named Rod Temperton. Rod was a white keyboard player from England who looked like he worked in an office. But Rod had the funk in his bones. Together, they formed Heatwave. This was not just a band. It was a United Nations of rhythm. You had Americans, a Swiss, a Czech, and Brits. They looked different, but when they played, they moved as one. Johnnie was the glue. He was the voice that tied it all together. Here is the deal. 1976 changed everything. They released the album Too Hot to Handle, and they were not lying. The first single was Boogie Nights. Picture the scene. It is a Saturday night. You are wearing your best polyester shirt. The collar is wide. The disco ball spins overhead, shooting little diamonds of light across the dance floor. The DJ drops the needle, that bass line kicks in, the harp slides up, and then you hear Johnnie. The song exploded. It hit number 2 on the US charts. It sold 1 million copies. Platinum plaques started showing up at his door. They were famous. Money flowed like water from a broken pipe. They toured the world. They played sold-out arenas. The boy from Dayton who dreamed of the Olympics was now running a different kind of race. And he was winning, but wait, it gets better. They proved they were not a one-hit wonder. They dropped the tempo. The lights in the club went down. The couples moved closer together. Johnnie stepped to the microphone and delivered a sermon on love. The song was Always and Forever. This wasn't just a hit record. This was a cultural anthem. Johnnie sang with a falsetto that could melt butter. He didn't sound like a pop star. He sounded like he was singing for the Temptations or the Delphonics. He had that raw, church-trained soul. He hit notes that floated in the air. Steve Russell from the group Troop called Johnnie one of the top 5 R&B singers of all time. That is high praise. When you played that song, you meant business. It became the soundtrack for weddings, anniversaries, and quiet storms on the radio. Years later, Martin Lawrence slow danced to it in the movie House Party. That scene proved that Johnnie's voice was timeless. It connected generations. Johnnie was on top of the mountain. He bought cars. He bought clothes. He sent money back home to his mother, Lucille. He was the pride of Ohio. He was an international superstar. His body was still in peak condition. He still had the muscles of a gymnast. He flipped across the stage during shows. He had the wind in his lungs and the world at his feet. The band went back into the studio. They recorded their next album, Central Heating. The song The Groove Line was climbing the charts. It felt like the party would never end, but the silence was waiting. It was February 1979. Johnnie was in Dayton visiting family and friends. He was celebrating. He was safe at home. He got into his car. He had driven thousands of miles in his life. He had flown on planes and traveled to foreign lands. But tragedy was sitting in the passenger seat. While the world saw a smile and a platinum record, the shadows were growing long. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. And Johnnie Wilder Jr. was about to fall harder than anyone could imagine. The music was loud, but fate was about to scream. The 24th of February 1979. The date is burned into the history of R&B. It was a cold day in Dayton, Ohio. The winter wind cut through coats and stung faces. But Johnnie Wilder Jr. felt warm inside. He was home. He was a superstar. His song, The Groove Line, was making people dance all over the world. He was visiting his family and friends, soaking up the love. He climbed into a rented van. He was going to a party. He turned the key and the engine roared to life. He probably hummed a tune as he pulled onto the road. He had no idea that these were the last moments he would ever walk. Here's the deal. Accidents happen in a split second. One moment, you are driving. The next, the world turns upside down. A car came out of nowhere. It slammed into the side of Johnnie's van. Metal crunched against metal. Glass shattered and sprayed like diamonds. The van spun out of control. The noise was deafening. Then there was silence. It wasn't the silence of a library. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of tragedy. Johnnie was conscious. He saw the dashboard. He saw the smoke rising from the hood. He heard the hiss of the radiator. He told his hands to unbuckle the seatbelt. Nothing happened. He told his legs to push the door open. They did not move. Panic set in. This was the man who studied gymnastics. This was the man who flipped across stages in London and New York. His body was a precision instrument. He knew every muscle. But now, the connection was cut. It was like someone had pulled the plug on a machine. Sirens wailed in the distance. They grew louder and louder. Strangers pulled him from the wreckage. They loaded him into an ambulance. The red lights flashed against the gray Ohio sky. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests. They looked at the x-rays. They whispered in the hallway. The news was a hammer blow. The crash had broken his neck. The spinal cord was damaged. The diagnosis was final. Johnnie Wilder Jr. was paralyzed from the neck down. Picture this. He lay in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms. Just days ago, he was a giant. He controlled the crowd with a wave of his hand. Now, he could not even scratch his own nose. He was 29 years old. The irony was cruel. He had spent his youth building the perfect body. He trained for the Olympics. He avoided drugs. He lived clean. He did everything right. But fate did not care. The road to success had collapsed beneath him. But wait, it gets worse. The band Heatwave was still climbing. They had tours booked. They had fans waiting. The music industry is a business. It does not stop for grief. The machine kept moving, but the engine was broken. Johnnie was the voice. He was the face. He was the leader. Lying in that bed, Johnnie had to face a new reality. He would never dance again. He would never hold a microphone on stage again. The falsetto was still there, trapped inside a broken vessel. Depression is a heavy blanket. It covers everything. Johnnie stared at the ceiling for hours. He wondered why this happened. He questioned God. He questioned his luck. The world kept spinning outside his window. People were still dancing to boogie nights. Lovers were still holding hands to always and forever. But the man who gave them those moments was fighting a battle for his sanity. The applause had faded. The cheers were gone. There was only the beep of the heart monitor and the long, lonely nights in Dayton. This was the fall, and it was a long way down. The headlines screamed tragedy. The news anchors put on sad faces. They told the world that the voice of Heatwave was silenced. Fans across America cried when they heard the news. They sent cards to the hospital in Dayton. But the music industry is a cold machine. It does not have a heart. It only has a bottom line. Here is the bitter pill. The radio stations kept playing boogie nights. The disco balls kept spinning in New York and Los Angeles. The checks kept clearing for the record label. But the phone next to Johnnie's bed stopped ringing. The suits in the tall buildings loved the hits. They loved the money the groove line made. But they did not know what to do with a paralyzed star. They could not put a wheelchair on the cover of a magazine. They could not sell pain. The media said they supported him. But the truth was in the silence. The tour bus left the station without him. The show had to go on. America loves a winner. We love the glitz and the glamour. We turn our eyes away from the struggle. While the world danced to his joy, Johnnie sat alone with his grief. He gave them always and forever. In return, the industry gave him a short memory. He learned the hardest lesson of all. The applause is for the performance, not the person. Johnnie Wilder Jr. proved that a man is more than his body. The crash took his legs, but it never touched his soul. He refused to let the wheelchair define him. He kept his faith close and his head high. Here is the truth. Every time Always and Forever plays at a black wedding in Detroit or an anniversary in Atlanta, Johnnie is there. When you slow dance with someone you love, his spirit is in the room. He gave the world a melody that time cannot erase. The industry moved on, but the culture never forgot. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. Do you remember the first time you heard that falsetto touch the sky? Tell us your memories in the comments below.